I didn't see it until I couldn't breathe. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even cruel. It was just a sentence, dropped into the room like a folded note, soft enough to miss unless you were the one it was written for. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. It was something like, "You're always too sensitive." And it landed where all quiet violence does, between my ribs, behind my smile, in the space I used to keep my worth. I laughed. Because that's what I'd learned to do. If I could make it funny, maybe it wouldn't be real. If I could be the one who wasn't hurt, maybe I wouldn't have to be the one who leaves. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who would stay. But staying doesn't always look like begging. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like twisting your own feelings into smaller shapes so they fit inside someone else's comfort. Sometimes it's just letting it slide. And I let it slide again until I forgot what it felt like to stand up inside my own chest. Until I couldn't tell the difference between shrinking and loving. You know, people think pain comes like thunder. But the worst kind, the kind that changes you, it comes like a slow drip. One word, one look, one sigh at a time. And before you know it, you're drowning in a room that never even had a storm. I would sit in the shower and wonder why I couldn't cry. Why the grief felt like cotton in my throat, dry, invisible, choking. And still, I stayed. Because there was always just enough sweetness to make me question myself. Because he didn't hit me. Because he said I was dramatic. Because I started to believe I was. If you've ever laid awake replaying the moment you should have walked away, if you've ever found yourself apologizing for bleeding after someone handed you a knife with a smile, if you've ever asked yourself, maybe I'm the problem? This is for you. I didn't see it until I couldn't breathe. Until love became a place I had to hold my breath inside. Until every compliment came with a leash. Until the version of me he liked best was the one that said nothing. I didn't see it until I felt myself disappear. And maybe you didn't either. But we see it now. Even if it's just a whisper. Even if it's still hard to believe. We see it. And that's where the real story begins. Right here. Where the silence finally breaks. It sounded like love at first. The way he said my name like it was something beautiful he'd just discovered. Something rare. Something worth repeating. I remember how his voice wrapped around words like, "You're different." And I believed him. Not because I thought I was, but because he said it like a promise. There was a warmth to it. Not fire. Not lust. Just that kind of low-burning glow that makes you open your chest without realizing your armor's already on the floor. He didn't ask me to take it off. He just spoke in a way that made me want to. It sounded like love at first. He noticed everything I thought no one would. The way I count steps before walking into a room. The way my fingers shake slightly when I'm telling the truth. He asked me questions that felt like doorways, and I opened them gladly. Because his attention didn't just land on me, it settled in me. Like he wasn't just listening, he was studying. Learning the edges of me like a language he already knew how to speak. I'd never felt that before. Not like this. Not with someone who made silence feel holy instead of hollow. Not with someone whose voice softened my defenses more than my doubts could harden them. He said things like, "You're safe now. I would never hurt you." And he said them too early, but somehow, right on time, because I was tired. Because I wanted to believe safety came from someone else's mouth. Because I mistook fluency in affection for fluency in love. And he was fluent. He spoke in lullabies, in morning texts, and goodnight calls, in just checking on you and "I miss you already." He made me feel like I was the center of a story he'd always been trying to write, and I let him write it. I gave him the pen. Because when you've been starved of softness, you don't question the hands that feed you, even if they tremble. Even if the touch feels like fire just beneath the glove. I didn't see the warning signs in the poetry. I saw them as passion, intensity, romance. Because no one ever tells you that the beginning of emotional control sounds like worship. No one warns you that manipulation doesn't shout, it whispers. and it whispered beautifully, "I can't believe you're real. You're not like the others. I don't know what I'd do without you." He built a pedestal so high, I thought the fall would never come, but it wasn't a pedestal. It was a cage, painted gold, lined with silk, designed to look like devotion. And slowly, the language changed. It didn't happen all at once. There was no sudden snap, no visible shift, just a gradual erosion of sweetness, like sugar left out in the rain. Still sweet, still familiar, but dissolving. Words like, "I adore you," turned into, "You're too much sometimes. You're overthinking again. You always ruin good things." And the worst part, I started believing him. Because he said it in the same voice he used to tell me I was beautiful. Because tone can lie, and I didn't know how to tell the difference yet. Because when you're trained to equate love with intensity, you think the ache is part of the music. I remember one night, I was crying over something small, something tender, something real. And he looked at me and said, "You're exhausting." Just like that. No cruelty, no volume, just a sentence, calm, precise, surgical. And in that moment, I felt my spirit flinch, but I stayed. Because part of me still heard the echoes of his early words, and I wanted to believe they were the truth. And this was the distortion. Not the other way around. I told myself maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was exhausting. Maybe love meant learning to be easier to love. But easy doesn't mean silent, and love doesn't mean swallowing yourself whole. It just took me too long to realize it. Because the memory of how it sounded at first, it haunted me. It held me. It tricked me into thinking the love I missed could be returned if I just softened again, smiled more, spoke less, stopped questioning. But there's a difference between being loved and being studied. One is mutual, the other is performance. And I had become a performer in my own life. Applauded for being low maintenance, rewarded for being agreeable, punished the moment I asked for more. He made me feel like a masterpiece in the beginning, then accused me of being too much canvas once the painting was done. So no, it didn't start with harm. It started with heaven. But I've learned something now. The most dangerous cages don't look like bars. They look like promises. They sound like forever. They feel like finally, until they don't. And by the time you realize you've been rewritten, it's already too late to remember the sound of your own voice. But this is me remembering, because I deserve to. And maybe you do too. He said it with that look, half smile, half worship, like he'd found something rare, and was trying to decide whether to protect it or possess it. You're not like other girls. And God, it lit something in me. Something soft. Something starving. I'd heard that sentence before, but never from someone whose voice curled around my loneliness so gently. Never from someone who made it sound like poetry instead of judgment. He didn't say it to insult anyone, or at least, that's what I told myself. He said it like a secret, like I was the only one who saw the world the right way, the only one who didn't need validation, the only one who understood him. And I clung to it, because being not like them made me feel chosen, made me feel above the chaos, above the crowd, made me feel like he saw something divine in me that other people missed. It was flattering, until it started to feel isolating. Because, not like other girls, slowly became, why can't you be more like who I said you were in the beginning? It became a mold, a mirror I had to live up to. An invisible script where I had to stay soft, low maintenance, agreeable, or risk being returned to the category he had warned me about. I thought I was special, but the truth is, I was just easier to accept because I hadn't asked for anything yet. He didn't love me for who I was. He loved me for how little of myself I showed. And slowly, that pedestal began to feel like a ledge. One wrong move, one human need, one emotional moment, and I could fall. Right into the pile of women he said he could never be with. And I started to wonder, Was I ever even on solid ground? Or was I just standing in the shadow of his preference, too grateful to notice I wasn't being seen, just separated? He said I was different. And maybe I was. But not in the way he meant. I was just the one who stayed long enough to realize what that sentence really cost me. It took me longer than I want to admit. To realize that the pedestal wasn't about reverence, it was about control. He didn't respect women. He studied us, ranked us, measured our value by how little we resembled the ones who scared him. They're too loud, too needy, always looking for drama. And every time he said it, I nodded just to keep my place as the exception. What I didn't see then was that his praise came with a warning label. Stay in line, or I'll stop pretending you're different. It wasn't admiration. It was a test. Be cool. Don't ask for too much. Don't act emotional. Don't be them. It didn't feel like love. It felt like a performance. A silent audition I didn't know I was part of until I started to fail. The first time I cried in front of him, he looked at me like I'd broken a spell, like the mask had slipped, like I'd betrayed the version of me he preferred. And suddenly, his compliments didn't sound like safety anymore. They sounded like cages. He didn't want a woman. He wanted a soft echo, a mirror that reflected his comfort, not my complexity. The more human I became, the less he knew what to do with me. I used to think he loved me because I was special. But the truth is, he just hadn't gotten bored yet. Hadn't seen the parts of me that reminded him I was real, flawed, alive, and now I see it so clearly. He didn't like women. He liked control. He liked silence. He liked the fantasy of someone who would never challenge him, never need too much, never make him look at himself. And I made the mistake of thinking I was safe because he hadn't hurt me yet. But silence is not safety. And tolerance is not love. He didn't choose me. He just delayed the moment he would reject me like all the others he spoke of with such quiet disdain. Now I know, if someone praises you by erasing others, they will erase you too. The moment you stop being convenient, the moment you stop being quiet, the moment you show them you are not an exception, you are a whole woman. He said it quietly, almost like he was tired, like the problem wasn't what I felt, but that I felt it at all. You're too emotional. 3 words, no yelling, no storm, just calm disappointment, like I was a mess he didn't have the energy to clean up. And for a second, I believed him, because I was crying, because my voice did shake, because I did feel everything all at once and didn't know how to filter it before it showed. But isn't that what it means to be alive? To break open sometimes? To let your heart speak in salt water? I didn't ask for too much. I just needed to be heard. I just needed my sadness to matter. But that day, it didn't. That day, it became an inconvenience, an overreaction, a flaw. And suddenly, I wasn't sure anymore. Was I asking for understanding? Or was I just being dramatic? That's how it starts, doesn't it? The slow rot of self-doubt. Not from cruelty, not from screaming, but from stillness. From a look that lingers too long. From a sigh that says, "Not this again." I began to apologize for crying, as if grief needed permission. I started whispering my pain, dulling it down like it came with volume control, telling myself, "He's tired. This isn't the right moment. Don't ruin the night." So I swallowed my truth until my throat forgot how to form it. And even when I did speak, I softened every sentence, dressed my wounds in careful language so he wouldn't flinch when he saw them. Because when someone calls you too emotional, what they're really saying is, "Your feelings make me uncomfortable. Could you shrink them, please?" And I did. I shrank. Not because I wanted to, but because I thought it was love. I thought love meant adjusting. I thought love meant not being a burden. But now I see it for what it was. A spiritual fracture. A soft betrayal. Not loud enough to break the room, but deep enough to break something inside me. That day, a part of me quietly stepped back, stopped asking to be seen, stopped believing I deserved to be seen. I started smiling through tears, laughing too quickly, saying, "I'm okay," when I was bleeding inside, because I thought if I made myself smaller, I could be easier to hold, easier to love, easier to stay for. But love that requires you to mute yourself isn't love, it's survival. And I survived for far too long in a space where my emotions had to ask for permission, where sadness had to be timed, and anger had to be erased. He never hit me, he never screamed, but he silenced me with a phrase, a glance, a growing distance that said, "You're too much." And I started to believe that maybe I was too soft, too raw, too sensitive, too human. But I'm done apologizing for that, because emotions aren't weakness. They're evidence, proof that I was there, that I cared, that I felt something real. And if that makes me too emotional, then so be it. I'd rather be too full than be hollow. I'd rather weep and ache and feel every sacred thread of this life than stand next to someone who only offers safety when I'm silent. I didn't know it then, but that moment was sacred. Not because he saw the worst in me, but because I began to see the truth in him. He didn't want all of me, just the version he could manage. And I am not here to be manageable. I am here to feel, to cry, to shatter, and rise, to speak even when my voice trembles, even when the room grows cold. Because the first time someone told me I was too emotional, a part of me went quiet. But now, she's learning how to speak again. Not louder, but truer, more whole, more herself. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, they were never meant to hold me anyway. He always had a way out. Whenever something cut too deep a sentence, a tone, a shift in the air, he'd tilt his head, sigh, and say it. I never meant it like that. And somehow, that was supposed to be enough. As if intention could erase impact. As if my body didn't still flinch. As if the words didn't echo long after the room went quiet. I'd try to explain. Not accuse, just explain how it made me feel. How something shifted inside me when he said it like that. How I couldn't breathe right after. But he'd blink like I was speaking another language. And suddenly, I was the one on trial. "You always twist things. You're reading too much into it. You're so sensitive." And I'd start to wonder, maybe he was right. Maybe I was making something out of nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was the way the silence settled. The way his words lingered like smoke. The way I felt my chest tighten, even when my mind told me I should be fine. I was drowning in explanations while he floated on innocence. Like pain only mattered if he could see it. Like if it didn't bruise my skin, it didn't exist. He never took ownership. Only offered escape routes. I didn't mean it. You took it wrong. Don't be so dramatic. And so the story became mine to fix. Mine to soften. Mine to translate into something less threatening. But it still hurt. Even if he didn't mean it. Even if he smiled after. Even if we made up. It still lived in me. Quiet, buried, breathing. Because pain doesn't ask for permission. It arrives when something breaks. And something was breaking even if he never noticed the sound. I used to know. Before the apologies, before the rewrites, before I started second-guessing my own reflection, I used to feel something shift, and I'd trust it. I'd name it. I'd move. But with him, every feeling became a question. Every instinct had to stand trial. Was I overreacting? Was I too sensitive? Was it really that bad? He taught me how to doubt the parts of me that once screamed truth. Not by force, not with rage, but with calm contradiction. You're making it up. I was just joking. You always do this. And soon, I started saying it for him. Before he could even respond, I became my own silencer, my own jury, my own gaslight. I would sit in the bathroom after a fight, chest tight, eyes red, replaying it all on mute. Trying to find the moment I became too much. Trying to locate the evidence that it wasn't real. That maybe, this time, the ache was my fault. That's the part no one talks about. How slowly you start to abandon yourself. How betrayal doesn't always come from someone else. Sometimes it begins with the voice inside you that says, "Don't trust what you feel." I talked myself out of my own knowing, over and over, until the mirror cracked. And one day, I looked at myself and realized, I don't believe me anymore. I don't believe my tears. I don't believe my body's signals. I don't believe my own soul. That was the fracture, not the fight, not the sentence, not even the silence that followed. The fracture came when I started standing on the wrong side of my own truth, when I began defending him against me. But no more. I'm learning to listen again, to feel without apologizing, to believe myself the first time, because my intuition never lied. It just got quieter, drowned beneath someone else's comfort. And now I'm calling her back, not with certainty, but with a whisper. I believe you. I'm sorry I left. His words didn't kill me, but they rewrote me. Not all at once, not with a bang, just slowly, silently, like erosion. A soft wind, every day, smoothing the edges of who I used to be, until I couldn't recognize the shape anymore. I used to laugh louder, speak quicker, say what I meant without weighing every word like it could detonate something. I used to ask for what I needed without rehearsing at first. But then came the pauses, the rewrites, the internal negotiations. I stopped saying, "That hurt me." I started saying, "It's okay. I know you didn't mean it." Even when it wasn't okay, even when he did mean it. I stopped asking him to listen when I cried. I learned to cry quieter, shorter, cleaner. I stopped sharing the dreams that made me feel too ambitious. I stopped disagreeing with his opinions not because I agreed, but because I didn't want to feel that cold space open up again between us. I started editing myself in real time. Tiny edits, quick deletions, soft erasures of truth, until I was a polished version of myself. Polished, but gone. He never told me to change. Not directly. That would have made him the villain. No, he just made me feel the consequences of being all of me. The long silences, the annoyed sighs, the shift in energy that said, "This is not what I signed up for." And so I adapted, like a woman trying to hold on to warmth by making herself smaller. The red flag wasn't that he said something cruel. It was that after he spoke, I stopped showing certain parts of myself. That's how I know it was never safe. Real love doesn't require you to disappear. It doesn't reward your silence and punish your honesty. It doesn't make you trade comfort for invisibility. But I did. I gave up pieces of myself like offerings, hoping it would keep the peace, hoping if I was careful enough, quiet enough, loving enough, maybe he'd stay soft. But his softness was always conditional, and my shrinking was the cost. The worst part? It worked, at least for a while. He stayed, smiling, affectionate, telling me how easy I was to be with now, and I mistook that ease for love. I mistook that silence for peace. But it wasn't peace. It was absence. Mine. That's the red flag no one warns you about. Not in what they say, but in how you shift when they say it. Not the insult, but the silence that follows. Not the cruelty, but the apology you whisper to yourself instead of asking them for one. The red flag is the version of you that starts to vanish, just to keep the version of them you wish were real. And I vanished. In all the ways that didn't leave marks, but left memories. Ghosts of the girl who used to feel like enough. I don't blame her. She just wanted love. She just wanted to be held. She didn't know that some hands only feel warm when you stop feeling yourself. But I know now. His words didn't kill me. They just convinced me to be quieter about my pain, smaller with my joy, gentler with my needs, more forgiving than I should have been. And that is not love. That is survival. So now, when I remember it all, I don't just look at what he said. I look at what I stopped saying. That's where the truth is. That's where the wound still lives. Not in him, but in the empty space where I used to be. I waited for a storm, but it was the drip that drowned me. I kept telling myself it wasn't bad enough to leave, that maybe I was too sensitive, that maybe this was just how relationships worked. A little confusion, a little pain, so long as it's not loud, so long as it's not visible. But the truth is, it was never about the volume. It was about the ache that kept returning every time I silenced myself to keep him comfortable. Every time I felt a heaviness after a conversation I couldn't explain. Every time I walked away from an argument feeling like I'd betrayed myself just to make it end. There were no broken plates, no screaming matches, no bruises to point to. Just little moments, little cuts, little disappearances of who I used to be. And still, I stayed. Because I thought pain had to roar before you were allowed to call it pain. But now I know better. I waited for louder harm, for undeniable proof, for someone to tell me, yes, this is real. Yes, you can go. But you don't need anyone to confirm your hurt for it to be valid. If you're questioning whether it's love, it probably isn't. Real love doesn't leave you confused and apologizing for things your body knows were never okay. You don't need a dramatic ending to justify your exit. You don't need one final betrayal to give yourself permission to leave. You only need one moment of truth, a quiet one where you finally admit, this is not love, this is not safety, this is not me. And if you've heard those words too, you're too emotional. I never meant it like that. You're not like other girls. You're always making things worse. Then you already know. Even if your mind is still spinning, even if your heart is still hoping, even if your hands still tremble at the thought of walking away, somewhere inside you, your body already knows. She knew the first time you cried alone in the bathroom, feeling like you had to hide it. She knew when your laughter got quieter. She knew when the apology left your lips, before you even knew what you were sorry for. That knowing, that sacred, quiet knowing, has been speaking to you this whole time. It doesn't shout, it doesn't demand, it just waits, patiently, softly. For the moment, you are finally ready to return to yourself. So this is your permission. Not from me, not from anyone else, but from the version of you still buried underneath the shrinking. You can leave. You don't need to explain it perfectly. You don't need him to understand. You don't need the story to make sense to anyone but you. You are allowed to choose yourself quietly, to walk away without a fight, to say no more in a whisper, and still have it be holy. And when you do, when you finally stop looking back, you will feel her again. The woman you were before you learned to dim. The voice inside that still burns, that still believes, that still remembers how whole you are without needing anyone to prove it. So let this be your affirmation. You are not too sensitive. You are not overreacting. You are not hard to love. You are not wrong for wanting to be safe. You are not the problem. You are the awakening. And your body already knows. Trust it now.